You're a railroad inspector. It's a lonely job, boring, out in the desert driving long stretches of track. It gets repetitive, endless, right up till you find the body. Unidentified dead body found in the desert. Boy, there's a headline you rarely hear. Now, if you live in the Mojave, you've probably heard it way too often, to the point where you don't even pay attention to the facts of the case, if they're ever discovered. But sometimes they're able to put a name to the body and a story. But does it always make sense? For over 100 years, the huge Mojave Desert has been crisscrossed by railroad tracks. Trains running back and forth at all hours of the day and night, and traveling through some of the most remote and hostile stretches. And to keep these mechanical beasts running, men have to regularly inspect and service the tracks, often heading out from small stations and sidings located in the middle of nowhere. One of these spots is the Kelso Depot in the middle of the Mojave National Preserve. 3 million acres of designated desert wilderness. The depot itself is a gorgeous Art Deco survivor. From the 1920s that is today a favorite stopover point for people heading through the preserve, often on their way to Las Vegas. But our story doesn't happen here. It happens 2 miles down the tracks at a little spot called the Glasgow Siding, which is a nice name for what is essentially nothing. But it was here, in 1954, that a railroad inspector was driving near the tracks checking the drainage ditches, when he happened to spot something down in the trench. Getting out to investigate, he found the body of an unidentified man, looking to be in his 30s, dressed in a nice, carefully tailored business suit, and sadly, a gory wound where his head had been bashed in. It looked like he had lain in the bottom of the 15-foot ditch for almost a month, totally unseen from the passing trains, and too far from the tracks to have been tossed from one. In fact, he was measured to be 164 feet from the tracks. And luckily, the animals had left his corpse alone. Interestingly, he carried no wallet or ID, but did have 2 $50 traveler's checks in his possession. So who was this man, and how did he end up here? Predictably, the papers and media began trumpeting the tale of the Desert Mystery Corpse. Now, the corpse didn't have a wallet or any ID, but there was a tattoo on the body that, when traced, turned out to be a Marine Corps serial number, and it belonged to 33-year-old Robert Whitwer of Nebraska, an electrician, a veteran of World War II, and a man who had bought a ticket for a train trip from Los Angeles back to Nebraska. So how did he end up in the desert, dead, with his head caved in? Okay. The man's identity was known, but the story the authorities and his relatives came up with to explain his death, to me, is a bit strange. Believable at first glance, but with some obvious red flags. See what you think. The police surmised he had somehow fallen from the moving train and bashed his head. Then, wandering about in a daze, he walked out into the open desert before tumbling into the 15-foot drainage ditch and dying. Their evidence? They claimed they found a, quote, disturbance in the dirt along the tracks nearby where he must have landed, a full month before. The second point, his brother and sister claimed he was coming from Los Angeles back to Nebraska to again, quote, receive treatment for a nervous disorder. But when he failed to arrive at the station, or indeed even show up or contact them for over a month, the two didn't file a missing persons report. The brothers simply told police they figured he had gotten off the train somewhere along the way to get a job. And now the third point, which as far as I know was never addressed. Why no wallet or ID? Does any of this explain how a man could end up dead along the tracks in a remote stretch of the Mojave Desert? It was an accident? So what do you think? Was he pushed, thrown, or did he stumble? And why was his family not concerned when he never showed up at the train station later? A bunch of little mysteries that all add up to a bigger mystery. Now, I have just been out to Glasgow Siding a few weeks ago. I was passing through and I decided to stop and just walk the tracks and kind of get an idea of maybe what could have happened. And the thing I found fascinating was that the police claimed that they found a mark in the sand where they thought his body had fallen a month before the body was actually discovered. Now, when you walk the tracks, it's on a raised bed of crushed rock. So it's not like something can just make an imprint. And the slope of the side of the tracks goes way down steep to the drainage ditches. So I don't really know what they would have found that they were convinced was his body, unless it's almost like a cartoon imprint of somebody hitting the ground. And how did he end up so far with such a grievous head wound? Like I say, a bunch of little mysteries that add a bigger one. Who knows? What do you think? I'm ML Behrman. I'll see you next time.